So today I want to talk about the biggest teething problem when learning something like conversation hypnosis, advanced conversation hypnosis, or really any sort of traditional therapies. It could be traditional NLP, whatever it is. What are the biggest teething problem, and what's the one thing you can do to get past this initial teething problem? Learning all styles of therapy have their teething problems and have their issues. But really what I've found amongst all of these things, it really comes down to the attitude of the therapist. And what a lot of people aren't going to talk about, you probably haven't heard this before unless you followed our stuff. It comes down to this, and this was a teething problem for me as well. Regardless of the style, when the therapist is trying to solve the problem, that'll put a halt to every great technique no matter how good it is, who taught you it, how much you know, how much experience you've had. Here's the one thing we know as therapists, and we all say this, but we go against this when we go to do the therapy. We know a client heals themselves. We know that the client's unconscious mind will find the resources, it'll make all the connections, it'll give the client a breakthrough, it'll give them insight, it'll do all the processing, it'll do all those wonderful things. But when we as a therapist are trying too hard to solve the problem, we stop the unconscious mind doing that stuff. Now, how do you know if you're trying to solve the problem? When you're putting pressure on yourself to perform, when you're putting pressure on yourself like, oh my God, how am I going to have this person quit? How am I going to have this person overcome this or feel this instead? What are you now doing? Not only putting that pressure on yourself, but now you're trying to come up with a scenario of how you would solve the problem. The worst thing a therapist can do, and it's very, very hard to do, you have to get taught, this is something we teach all of our therapy students to do on day one of our ACH training, is stop trying to solve the problem. The only thing you need to do as a therapist is understand what the problem is about, why it's there, get some insights and get some details. And from this and getting clarity on a client's unconscious problem, because that's what we know what the problems are, you'll find that the unconscious mind will switch from having the problem to solution very, very quickly. But we as a therapist try too hard to show off. Maybe it's an ego thing, it's a pressure thing, it's our own anxieties coming up. We want the session to work. When you start trying to solve the problem, you will stop the client's unconscious mind from giving you the right information that gives you insight into helping this client find the place where those resources are. So a big teething problem amongst many, but this is the main one. When you're too busy trying to solve the problem, you're going to put pressure on yourself. It's going to make therapy very, very hard. Stop trying to solve the problem and instead change to a mindset of investigation. Get really, really curious as to why your client's problem exists in the first place. That's the only thing you should worry about. As soon as you start trying to connect the dots, trying to pull things apart, trying to do some of this, trying to regress that client, trying to use this technique, you're now trying to solve the problem. And I've talked about this before about when therapists say, I have to use a regression, I have to use language pattern, I have to do Erics, I have to use NLP. What are you now doing? You're now trying to solve a client's problem based on a technique you're trying to have your client fit. And we know one thing about our clients do not fit into techniques. Techniques do not fit into clients' problems. Your client is their own technique. They will solve their own problem, but you have to be patient enough to allow that to happen. And if you're too busy trying to solve the problem, you'll miss the point entirely. And I really believe this wholeheartedly. This is the number one reason why therapists, beyond just not finding the root cause, have to spend session after session after session after session. Now, sure, mentors will tell you got to have this amount of sessions, you got to have this. That's just all conclusions, because that's not the case. Clients can solve their problems very, very quick if you stop trying to force them down the way that you want them to go. If you stop trying to solve the problem for them, if you stop putting pressure on yourself and allow that client to solve their own problem, find out with their own insights, the unconscious mind can work very, very, very quickly. So instead of trying to solve the problem, put pressure on yourself, just investigate what the problem is about, why it's there, and watch all the magic unfold in front of you guys.